I'm trying to think of where I should begin. I think it was when we went to Florida, and I remember we stopped someplace and my two brothers were there, and one of my brothers decided that beans were a nice thing to play with. We put a bean up his nose. Then he got in trouble again. He was eating a hot dog and he choked on it. And my father picked him up, side down, and shook him, and the hot dog came out. So those are the kind of things children do, I guess. And that was in Florida. I remember one thing that my mother was standing beside our old Ford, and the area where we were living was very sandy. And so my father started up the old Ford. You know what that means. You get out and you go crank, 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 crank. And so he started up his old Ford and started off, ran over my mother's foot. But of course it didn't hurt because it just sunk into the sand. There are some sad parts to that story. I don't remember how old I was when I first, when we left Florida, but I do remember that we came back, we went to Ohio, we went to Toledo, Ohio. One of the funny things that happened, well, my father was looking for a church, so we went to this church, and it was upstairs. I remember that. And I remember my father, I don't know if I heard this from him or if I was there and saw it. I think I saw it because it's so vivid in my mind. He asked the pastor, he says, "What do you have to do to join this church?" That's a simple question, you know. And the pastor said to my father, he said, "Just shake the pastor's hand." And my father didn't like that. We never went back. I guess he didn't think that was a good idea. But then we went to another church in that same area, and this lady was dancing up and down the aisle. There were folding chairs, and we were sitting at the end of a row. So my father was sitting on the aisle side, and so she comes dancing up the aisle, and she did it a couple of times, and her hair all comes down and hangs way down here, and she's dancing around, and pretty soon my father got up and took us, and we all left the church. Well, I found out why. This woman had tried to sit on his lap. Well, that's what I heard. I didn't see it. I was too young. I just heard that story. So we didn't join that church. I don't know if we went to any more churches. We lived upstairs. At Easter time, my father got us a couple of bunnies. So we had a couple of bunnies running around our little apartment there. And during the day, there were a lot of people who raised tomatoes. And the reason they raised tomatoes, because that town was a place where catsup and all kinds of tomato type things are put into jars and cans and stuff and sold. So we went out and with a little red wagon, and we filled our little red wagon with tomatoes and went down and sold our wagon full of tomatoes to the company that made tomato catsup. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's very common. That's one of the things we did in Toledo. Well, one of the things that happened was I started to go to school. Well, I don't know why this happened, but we had a table with little bench with a bench on each side, and so there were only about, I'm going to guess, 4 or 5 children there, and I'm sitting at the bench, and I got an urge, and I raised my hand, and she says, "You just have to wait." So I sat there for a while, and I raised my hand again, and she said, "You have to wait." Well, pretty soon it was too late to wait, so I sort of watered the floor. After that, when I raised my hand, she let me go to the bathroom. Then I went home. My mother is getting me ready for school, and she said, "What's the matter with you? I'm trying to comb your hair, and as soon as I comb one side, you mess it up, and what's going on with you?" And I'm itching my head, I'm scratching away. So she decides to look and see if there's some problem. Yep, it was a problem, all right. I had lice. Oh, my mother was very upset. Lice in her little girl's hair. So guess what she did? She washed it with kerosene. That worked. Then one day, I don't know what my mama was doing, but I was playing with a broom handle. I don't know if they had a broom, it was a real broom, or if it was just the handle of the broom, but I was using it as a thing you put it out in front of you and then jump. Well, that was a lot of fun. My mother said, "You're going to fall, you're going to hurt yourself." So I kept doing it till I did. So after I fell, I quit doing it. So I can't remember any more stories from that period of time.